Hello, and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And we just did our Elite Eight predictions. And when we recap the games, we left one out, and that is for a very, very specific purpose. We left out Purdue and St. Peter's because the two of us, this game has had a very, very special meaning. If you watch the Sweet 16 predictions episode, you realize that we spent a lot of time hyping up this game, a lot of time bantering, and a lot of time pontificating what could might be. But what could might be, the impossible is. As St. Peter's continues their miracle run, they have punched their ticket to the Elite Eight, defeating Purdue 67-64. And essentially what it boils down to, jubilation for everybody who rooted for St. Peter's, which would be yours truly, and heartbreak for Purdue. You're wearing it with pride. So
yeah.
Are you ready to run it?
What else can you do? Yeah, I guess so. Let's run it.
So I understand, Tim, you have a lot to say about how this game went, probably how the season went in general, and where the Boilermakers are going in the future. But before you get into that, I'm just going to, give my side of this. In the Sweet 16 video, I had the tweet replying to John Rothstein that said, no team has ever made it to the Elite Eight. You said in that episode that we're going to watch that tweet age poorly.
I said what I said.
You said what you said. You've been saying it with your chest all tournament long, and time after time after time, somehow aged like fine wine as that tweet has come to fruition. St. Peter's has punched their ticket to the Elite Eight. I mean, it's been a hell of a ride as I've stuck with St. Peter's, from the very beginning, going to that Kentucky game, watching them defeat Kentucky in person, sticking with them the next round against Murray State, and of course, picking them against Purdue, and of course, picking them against North Carolina, because they will, at this point, who's going to stop them? I can't find an answer if they barreled through the 2 and the 3 seed in that region. So, I mean, it's been incredible to watch what St. Peter's has done, but unfortunately there are two sides to every story. And, you'd think I'd be happier for St. Peter's, their victory. It just sucks that it had to come at Purdue's expense, where this was the year you thought that this was, the year that Matt Painter finally put it all together and advanced to the Final Four, maybe even a national championship. I mean, they had guys all over the place. I mean, you said it yourself, Travion Williams and Zach Edey. If you cover those guys, who's going to stop Jaden Ivey? Who's going to be able to cover all of the guys that Purdue has had to offer? Apparently St. Peter's can, and they did. It was a great game to watch. It was very fun for me, but Tim, you definitely have a different perspective. So the floor is yours. I know you have a lot to say.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think what it boils down to, and I think this has been proven for all 3 of St. Peter's games in this tournament, discipline over talent. And I think that's what proved to be true in this one. When it comes to decision making, shot selection, turnovers, free throws. I think this game really came down to that discipline aspect. You have 6 turnovers from Jaden Ivey. A lot of them were the pretty classic, doesn't know exactly where he's going, kind of gets stopped in his shoes a little bit, jumps, tries to figure out a pass, ends up getting tipped or out of bounds somewhere. And then you had 5 turnovers from Zach Edey as well. And it's a kind of a situation of like that situational awareness of being aware of where you are on the floor, where guys are around you. And I think that's what this team was missing for a large portion of the year, was a lot of that situational awareness. They had all the talent in the world, especially across the board, and all these different guys. And as we've said, it's going to be an incredibly hard team to ever match or recreate in the future in terms of overall talent wise. But there definitely was a lot to be a lot left to wish for in terms of that discipline aspect. And we've seen so many of these teams that have advanced with that discipline aspect.
The turnovers was an absolute killer for Purdue.
Yeah.
I mean,
it always has been.
Yeah. And like you talked about 11 accounted for just by Jaden Ivey and Zach Edey alone. Purdue turned the ball over 15 times in the game. And that is a credit to the defense of St. Peter's. They won the battle in steals and blocks, but Purdue just didn't exactly have that disciplined basketball that they needed all night long. And certainly a disappointing outcome as turnovers were a huge part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you see the Matt Painter Purdue teams that go far, that make deep runs. Other than this year, of course, making it to the Sweet 16, I'm not sure if I'd really call that a deep run, but the run that they did make, pretty much all previous runs are based around a very solid, very defensive-minded team. And that's what this team wasn't, and that's what a lot of people doubted their ability to make it past some of these rounds. Is when the shots aren't falling, you have to fall back on defense. You have to fall back on the ability to turn defense into offense, and that's another thing that didn't happen this game. And that's not to say that Purdue didn't have their chances. I think they completely, despite how well that St. Peter's played, Purdue 120% shot themselves in the foot by not making open shots, by not rebounding the ball particularly well on the defensive end. There were multiple times where they gave up key offensive rebounds that allowed St. Peter's to either take more time off the clock or get a second chance at getting a bucket.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the rebounds. Purdue did win the rebounding battle on both offense, defense, and total rebounds. They out-rebounded St. Peter's by
but
quite
you should against a team that has that lacks
by
in
quite
that
a bit,
size.
actually. But when you sport 6'10" Travion Williams and 7'4" Zach Edey down low, you'd think that would merit more rebounds. But it's not like the total quantity of rebounds. It is the quality of rebounds and the timely rebounds that St. Peter's got that allowed them to convert their second chance baskets and stay in the game.
Well, yeah, and there's also just a couple of things throughout like those last couple of minutes there is just simply it's I don't even want to call those situational awareness. It was just kind of like simple basketball plays that you got to understand like where you are and the timing on things. Is certain rebounds that they gave up, which obviously we just talked about, but the one that really stood out in my mind is Purdue down 2 with, I don't know what I would say, anywhere between a minute and a half left.
It was a crucial part in the game nonetheless.
Well, Purdue comes up with a very solid defensive possession. I can't remember who the ball handler was, but he dribbled off a screen into the center of the lane. Travion Williams bats a hand on the ball, knocks it out towards just outside the right of the free throw line. And with 3 seconds left on the shot clock, Mason Gillis dives for the loose ball and essentially chop blocks the guard in the back of the leg, giving them a foul.
Yeah,
the
that
ability
was
to shoot 2 free throws to make it a 4-point game. And it's one of those things. It's situational where you got to understand where you are and what time it is on the floor. It's like, I love Mason Gillis. He then went like the next play had got an offensive rebound to cut it back down to 2. But it's just those things that you got to understand when to turn it on, when to turn it off. Because I love his fight. He's an incredibly scrappy player. But it's just those little simple mistakes that when you're trying to get back into a game against a team that has been more disciplined than you and has the upper hand, you can't afford to make those simple mistakes. And that's what this one came down to. Clearly, I mean, it wasn't like a blow up by any means. It was close.
Well, you didn't think it would be anyway. You said
no. It was always stupid for the line to be 13 in Purdue's favor. It was 12.5, I think, at the time. It ended up 13. As
people were actually putting money on Purdue, so the line bumped up to Purdue minus 13.
Yep.
But you saw it coming a mile away that this was going to somehow be a dogfight. And there's no question as to who the more talented team on the court is. It's Purdue, but like you
Like
said,
I said,
the
discipline
discipline,
over talent,
discipline.
because it's like, and it shows in so many aspects of the game for so many different teams as well. It's not just Purdue in this aspect, but for Purdue, we've seen it all year round. That discipline leads to games of either a game of poor free throw shooting, which I will give them credit. They fixed a lot of that towards the very latter end of the season, and in their 3 games in the NCAA tournament. But the turnovers have always been a problem. And when they do it in bunches, and that changed the momentum of the game entirely. And that's what allows them to go on big runs when they're playing really well and they're actually getting good shots out of their offensive possessions, because they're obviously they were one of the most offensive, or one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country this year. But then when they weren't that disciplined team, you see 3-4 turnovers out of 5 possessions. And all of a sudden you're giving teams chances to get points off fast breaks and go on a little bit of a run, get the crowd going into it. And you could definitely tell that was a big part of today's game as well. Because I mean, you talk about the home crowd for St. Peter's, but obviously having as many actual true St. Peter's fans there, that certainly helped them. But you also saw, of course, the nature of the other game and the later game. Anybody in there who happened to be wearing a shade of blue was a St. Peter's fan that night. If you were a UCLA fan, if you're a North Carolina fan, they didn't want to see Purdue come out of this matchup. I can guarantee that. As much as quite at this point, I'm not sure if you want to run into St. Peter's, but I'm sure they wanted to see that win happen. You could tell from the crowd they definitely fed off of that. So it's one of those things where the cards just kind of stacked a certain way, and when Purdue were given the chances, and they were 120% given the chances to make the necessary plays to sort of really cut that lead, they just couldn't do it when they needed to most.
Yeah, they couldn't come up when it counted. And this was the team. This was the year you had the guys. You were a complete team. And I watched a fair bit of the post-game interview with Matt Painter and the 3 seniors, Sasha Stefanovic, Eric Hunter Jr., and Travion Williams. Those 3 are key players for Purdue that are going to depart. Jaden Ivey being another one who's going to end up being a top pick in next year's NBA draft. He will most likely depart. It was very eye-opening to see just how drained Purdue looked. Like they had given it their all. They knew this was their chance, their golden opportunity to make something happen. And you talked about earlier a deep run, how you said like a Sweet 16 wasn't a deep run. Yes, they won 2 games in the tournament. That wasn't the expectation. We all know that wasn't the expectation. The expectation was national championship or bust. And Purdue just didn't get there. I mean, St. Peter's is no pushover. We have figured that out like very clearly, very early on in the tournament. We saw that they were going to be no pushover when they went toe to toe with Kentucky and they knocked them out.
Yep.
But Purdue, simply put, they tiptoed into a fist fight. St. Peter's punched him in the mouth. And here we are.
Yeah, I think one of the last things that I'll say is, when it comes down to it, I think it was throughout the season, because obviously I've been following them the whole way and whatnot. Coming into the season with the talent, with the preseason ranking, with the talk about them, all the guys they have, the offensive talent, and of course the nature of Purdue's recent tournament experiences. If you look not only to last year, but the past 5-8 years, you had a couple of early round exits as well. It is safe to say that this university and this basketball program has a lot of pressure, and especially this year had a lot of pressure to perform and prove that they could perform at the highest level. And throughout the season, you saw them do a lot of that, but you also saw it catch up to them at times where they came up short in a lot of games that they very much should have won. And granted, that's true of a lot of teams, but I think with this organization, with this program, it's a little different because it's a program that wants to be seen and considered with some of the greats in college basketball at the moment, but they just don't quite have the results and the performance year in and year out to really cement themselves in that conversation. They're always kind of knocking on the door, but it can't ever seem to quite get it done truly, other than, of course, like the near Final Four run in 2019. You don't see a lot of deep runs out of Purdue, despite the very talented teams that we've had. And it'll be interesting to see how they go to recover from this. I think the biggest thing that I think that this team, and this is no discredit to Eric Hunter Jr., Isaiah Thompson, but I think what this team was missing was the true floor general. As much as the offensive talent you can have all in the world, you need somebody to really control the game when things are all over the place. And that's one of the things that you see out a lot of these teams, even if they aren't the most talented teams, some of these teams that do make deep runs. It's that point guard or shooting guard position, that ball handler that can really hold down the fort for you. You saw that, of course, with the explosiveness of Carson Edwards for Purdue back in 2019. And I think that's a big focus that I think Purdue will need to focus on going forward, because, of course, losing Eric Hunter Jr., you're in line to have Isaiah Thompson be the starting point guard next year. And as much as he is a good offensive contribution, I will be nervous if he is the lead ball handler for the majority of this season, if he does not massively improve on the physicality side of things. He's a very slight dude. He's a great shooter, but the problem is he came out of high school as mostly a shooter. But once again, a lot of that is to be seen in the future. You got a decent amount of guys returning from either redshirt or injury. You've got a pretty solid class for Purdue coming in as freshmen. Some of them will redshirt, some of them will kind of get thrust right into the limelight with some of the roles that you're going to be trying to fill. But that's where the end of the line really fell for him this year. And a lot of those guys are going to be thinking about that for a long time to come. But at the end of the day, it's a game that we all play, and some people play a lot more seriously and dedicate their life to, and these guys have dedicated so much time to working on their craft and really making it their life. So you really feel for those guys. But at the end of the day, there is going to be life tomorrow, and they're going to have to move on and become bigger people, bigger men from it. So the tournament continues, their lives continue, and the run of St. Peter's continues, and there'll be plenty more to see here on out from both of these teams.
Yeah, I had an outro like that I was thinking about, but yeah, you put it pretty perfectly. At the end of the day, this is just a game. Some people, this is their lives, but everything happens for a reason. And depending on how the players of Purdue handle it, they will learn from it. They will be better for it. And Purdue, the future is to be determined. And you mentioned they are trying to be one of the elites in college basketball. There's no doubt in my mind that they can be. It's just
I think they
coming
just need
up.
to back it up
Yeah.
a little bit more.
It's coming up short in the tournament, coming up short with expectations. Not necessarily succumbing to the pressure, because that's not the right way to put it, but there is a lot of pressure on this Purdue program to be successful, because that is what they could be. But for right now, that is what we're left with, a could and not an is. But the sun will rise again tomorrow. There will be a next season for Purdue Boilermakers basketball, and what the
future, a little different,
and what the future holds, who knows? And on the other side, St. Peter's continues their miracle run into the Elite Eight. But that is all we got for this episode of the Running the Table podcast. In basketball, in this game, there is a winner, there is a loser, It's unfortunate that Purdue had to be on the wrong side of history for today. If you like some of our content, you could watch some more of it on YouTube or listen on Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are listened to, because we have that up and running now.
Got some stuff in the works. Yeah.
We do have some stuff in the works. We're excited for where this channel is going to go. It's been a fun ride so far. We're going to continue to ride that wave for as far as it'll take us. But until next time, we out.